determine your level of financial need. And that level of demonstrated, I use that word, demonstrated financial need, helps us know what kind of aid that is available to you through the federal means, you know, the state, school, scholarships, etc. So the federal government, federal financial assistance is used there to determine what we can get that. The state and the school also uses it for some scholarships are required demonstrated financial need. So, so that's why it's really important to fill it out. And as close to January 1st as you can. We're already at January 28th. I admit it, we don't have ours done yet either. It's on the cusp. It's going to be done probably within the week, but as close as you can, because as I explained earlier, because of those kinds of aid that are limited in funding, and the early bird gets the work. So you want to do that. EFC, there's another acronym for you. Expected Family Contribution. How many of you are familiar with seeing that on your FAFSA information or your student aid report? Have you seen that before? Some of you are familiar with what that is. That number is really, you know, they take all this information that they're gathering on the FAFSA, your parents' income information, your income information, how many people are in your family's household, how many of you are in college, all those things are put into this on the FAFSA and then put into a calculation. And then they put that in, and then what is spit out, basically, is the EFC, the expected family contribution. What is expected that you and your family might have set aside to assist you with paying for school for that year. That can change from year to year, obviously, as incomes change and household sizes change. But that's what that EFC, what you might have set aside, or your family might have available. It doesn't always work out that way. But we use that figure to help us figure out. Now, I mentioned Oklahoma Tuition Aid Grant earlier in the March 1st deadline. You have to have an expected family contribution of $1,700 or below that to be eligible for Oklahoma Tuition Aid Grant. So that's how that EFC comes into play in figuring out if you can get an Oklahoma Tuition Aid Grant, OTAG or not. So it has to be below that. And of course the FAFSA tells us that information. And then we also use the EFC coupled with the cost of attendance to help us determine the level of financial income. Cost of attendance is made up of the components that you see here. Tuition and fees. And I asked the group yesterday, how's that? Some of you are probably upperclassmen and remember being, when you were just charged your tuitions by the credit hour. And if you're an Oklahoma's Promise student, it's still that way. What do you think about the block rate thing? How's that working out? Some of you find that useful. Some of you, I'm curious. I'm just curious about your opinion. What do you got in?
I think if you're taking more than 15 hours, it does help you.
Yeah, you're right. Anywhere from 12 to 18 hours, right? It does. You can come out ahead a little bit. Encourage you to get through there. But anyway, tuition and fees is all bundled up in that block rate. Or if you're an Oklahoma's Promise, that student has Oklahoma's Promise, you are still charged by the credit hour in that one. So that is a little different on that one. Tuition and fees will vary. Room and board, books and supplies, personal miscellaneous expenses, transportation. Now the first three are the more direct costs. You got to pay the school kinds of things. The bottom two are those personal miscellaneous things you have a lot of control over. You know, how much gas you put in the car, if you have health insurance, whether you go out to eat a lot, or you know, if you have a closed budget that's really big, or if you're a thrifty person. But you also have some control over your room and board too, where you live. It's interesting on campus, the variance of, you know, for residence halls, the cost. So you really have some control, and you can do some cost-cutting things. But the cost of attendance is set by the school. We do a survey of information periodically and figure out what survey students and figure out what y'all are paying basically for those different things, and then we set up this cost of attendance for what's happening here. And so that'll vary from place to place, school to school. But that EFC, that doesn't change. Even if you have a sibling in another school, or if they were to come here, that EFC would be the same for them. Now, yours from your siblings will be different because you have different income from year to year, and that would be different. But the cost of attendance is set by the school. Come on in. So this is how we figure financial need. We take that cost of attendance and we subtract out of it your EFC. And what's left over is financial need. And we try to fill that up with anything that we can that's based on financial need, like Pell Grant. If it's Pell Grant, if your EFC is low enough, you might have Pell Grant with your tuition aid grant. Subsidized loans, those are based on financial need. Federal work study based on financial need. So, and there are some scholarships based that way too. That's how we figure that out. Does anybody have an idea about how long, on the average, it takes to fill out? This is a bit of trivia. Average it takes to fill out a FAFSA? Anybody have guesses? 45? Okay, others?
10 to 20 minutes.
10 to 20? You are fast. That's awesome. Well, they say that the average is, yeah. An hour? 2 hours? You guys need to call us up and make an appointment. Help you. Oh, and I know the first time I did it takes a little while. But the nice thing about it as we go through the thing is, if you've done it once and you go back in and you log in, it's going to pre-populate some of your demographic information. And hopefully that'll knock off some of that hour, 2 hours, and make it a little quicker for you. But the other thing is the little sheet that I gave you, that you have, the web, the financial FAFSA on the web worksheet, that will help you. Because it tells you some of the things you need, and it'll ask you some of the questions already. So if you get those filled out ahead of time, and you get that information, it's really going to be a matter of filling in the blanks, and the 10 to 20 minute thing just might be more realistic. Actually, they say 37 minutes is the average nationwide. So that's something to aspire to if you want to. But I do want to say, if you would like some assistance with it, we're more than happy in our office to do that. You can call us up and set it up like that, and we would be glad to assist you with that. And we'll do that. Make it a little quicker and easier. So, okay. Caught up on my notes here where I'm at. Well, does this screen look familiar to you? And I apologize if I'm standing in Neil's way over here. This is when you go to FAFSA.gov, not .org or .com, FAFSA.gov, this is what you're going to see. This is what the page looks like. And it's pretty similar to last year. How many of you have filled out paper? Anybody in here use paper format? Once? Okay, good. But, and you still can. You'll see, you can't see it on this screen, but if you scroll down a little bit, it gives you options on how you can fill out the FAFSA. You can actually print the FAFSA if you wanted to, or print this worksheet again if you get home and you don't have it. The worksheet will be available to you. But actually, it's going to be faster, more accurate if you do it online, because it may not take as many hours because it's got some skip logic. So if you answer a question and it says, well, you don't need the next one, it's going to skip on to the next question that you do need to answer. So that's a nice feature of that. But anyway, if you are first time returning, this is what you're going to see. A first time user would click on the Start a New FAFSA, but you guys, since you're returning, you've done it before, you're going to click on the Login, and then you'll log in and you'll start your FAFSA. And it will pre-populate, like I said, some of that information a bit quicker. There are deadlines listed here, same as on the worksheet. Then you'll see those there. The school code is there, and of course there are some announcements and things that will be helpful to you. And if you need some help, or even financial aid help, whatever, you'll see where the red arrows are at the top. Those are some really helpful sites and can help you a lot too. And I want to make sure that you get to our school code. I've got that on here in just a little bit. I'll give you OSU school code so you've got that. And you can write that one down so you've got it, and it'll make it quicker for you. Again, first-time users are going to see this. You'll see on there, you'll have returning users. There are 2 years FAFSAs out there now. The current year, which is the 14-15, and also then you'll see the new 15-16 school year out there. And of course, you'll want to choose the 15-16. If you forgot your PIN, you can go back to the PIN website, pin.ed.gov, so you'll see down at the bottom here, and get a duplicate. They can give you can get that back. or you can reset it if you prefer. But remember, your parents need a PIN number too. Your parent, whichever is your proper parent, will need their PIN number so they can sign this thing too. That's a really important thing on that. And if you're returning, this is then what you'll see. You'll click on login and then it'll bring this up and you'll put your information in and it will recognize you and move on to that. Any questions so far? All right. This is kind of the breakdown of the sections of the FAFSA. And the first part, the student demographics, again, that's a lot of that's going to be pre-populated, but I do encourage you to read through it, make sure it's accurate. People move, families move, numbers change, emails change, etc. So be sure and read through that, make sure that's accurate. And then you'll move on to the school selection. And that's where you're going to input OSU school code. And if you've got your pen handy, I'll give you our school code. I'm just dying to give it to you. We're not going to screen yet, and I don't want to forget. So it's 003170. That's the OSU Stillwater school code. And yeah, 003170. That's what that means. That's where you put that in. It gives a space for, like temporary schools or something you can list. But you have to put a school code in. If you don't put a school code in, your information won't go anywhere. It'll just stay right there with the feds. That's like your authorization to say, this is who can get my information. So if you don't put it in, it's not going to go anywhere. But you can always go back and add it if you forgot to. But that's important to school selection. And I think as part of that, you also indicate whether you're living on campus, off campus, living with your parents, things like that, so that they can know that too, because that kind of factors in on the cost of attendance. Dependency status. If you take the web sheet that I gave you, go to the second page, that's on the web sheet. Just on the inside on the second page there, you see down at the bottom. And when we talk about dependency status, you graduate from high school and turn 18 and, the world says you're an adult and you're independent now and away you go. But for financial aid purposes, probably most of you are still what we call a dependent student. And that just means that for financial aid purposes, there's an expectation that the parents are still involved and responsible in assisting in educating, paying for education for their students, etc. So you're probably classified as a dependent student, unless one of these things in this section applies to you. So let's say you're filling the FAFSA out today and you're married. You are independent automatically by that one thing. Or there's a date by which you have to be born by, or you're changing to be, you've graduated, now you're going to be a graduate student. So if one of these things apply, that makes you an independent student. In general, that's how that works. So if you are dependent, that means you're going to need to provide your parents information, income information, etc. That'll be part of that. Now there are situations where students have some other kind of circumstance, and this doesn't apply, and the other doesn't apply either. It doesn't quite work. So if you're in a situation where you're just not sure, or perhaps there's a relationship with your parents and your parents and you are not speaking, it could be a variety of things. If your dependency status, what you need to do at that point, since you can't really express all of that on the FAFSA, make an appointment with someone in our office, one of our financial aid counselors, and we can go through that with you and help determine and facilitate the possibility of what we call a dependency override, if that's warranted, but we can explore that with you to help you find a way to get your financial aid in the appropriate way. So don't forget, if something doesn't fit, call us. That's the best thing to do, and ask the question so that we can help you with that. So dependency status, that's what that's going to do. So like I said, most of you may be dependent, and so that's where parent demographic information will come in, and you'll list your parents, their social security numbers, their, all their information that it asks for. And then the next section will be financial information. Do you think that, how many of you think that you have to file taxes to file the FAFSA? Anybody? Okay. The reality of it is, if you file taxes, that's fine, but you're not required to file the taxes to file the FAFSA. What they ask is, and that's a very common question that we have, so I appreciate your honesty in saying that, but you don't have to file taxes to file the FAFSA. If you're required to file taxes, you need to, absolutely, because, and put that information on the FAFSA. But let's say you worked and you only earned about $400 last year, that was it, you didn't want to mess with it. You know, if you're under and you meet the criteria that you don't have to file taxes, that's okay. The FAFSA will ask you, did you file taxes? Or will you file taxes, or are you not going to file taxes? So you just indicate the appropriate one, but you will list your income. It will ask you then, okay, you did file taxes, how much did you earn in 2014? So it'll ask you to indicate your income earned from work. And that applies to your parents also, if there's a reason and it's appropriate and they didn't have to file taxes or something. That's okay. Now, if you haven't filed taxes yet, but you're going to, then you will file, and you'll want to go back later and correct that information at a later time. So financial information will be both yours and your parents' financial information. And then there'll be a section to sign and submit, and then there'll be a confirmation page. So finally, we get to the school code. So if you couldn't understand me, or if you heard something different, there's the school code for OSU and what it looks like on the table. So you'll actually enter that school code on there. So now, another question, and this is the last sheet that you have in your packet. The back side of it says parent information on the back side. The families in the world these days come in a lot of different shapes and sizes. And sometimes it's difficult to know, what do you mean parent, which one? I have 4 parents. How do I decide which parent should be on FAFSA? And whose income information do I provide? So this is just a little worksheet that'll help you work through who your parent is. And it says, it's just a flow chart. And it says, are your parents married to each other? If your parents are married to each other, you're going to put both of them on and their income information on there. What if your parents, do your parents live together? And if your parents live together but they're not married, that's okay. You're going to put both of them on. If your parents, did you live, if they're not married to each other, and they don't live together, which parent did you live with more in the last 12 months? That would be the parent you choose. Then if this parent is married or remarried, then you would include the step-parent's information also. So this will help you decide if they're married, and it just takes you through it quite nicely. Does anybody have any questions or that they'd like to ask about that? But it's really important to determine which parent. And if your parent that is correct, the correct parent is remarried, remember, you got to put the step-parent information on, because we come back later and have to ask for it, and that makes it longer for you. Yeah.
What if your parents are married but they live separately?
Parents, but they live separately? You would still, if they live separately, do you mean are they separated, or they just happen to be dad works here and mom works here? Or
you have 2 parents that don't get along and then they just live in separate places, but they're still legally married?
Well, if it's classified as a separation and they're still married, but they're separated and they maintain separate households, and they would claim themselves to be married but separated, then it would be, they don't live together, you would select which one you live with more.
But that's a legal separation, right?
Well, don't necessarily have to have paperwork, but if they are separated and are seeking separation, then that, I would suggest if you have questions about it, the specific scenario, call us up and let's look at your specific scenario. But if parents are separated, they don't have to be divorced, but if they're separated, then you're looking at which parent did you live with most last. And there are some scenarios there where parents are married and they're not separated, they just live apart because they work in 2 different communities. If you have a scenario that's a little, you'd still have to put both down on that. But if you had questions about it, that's something we can discuss too in terms of the cost of attendance and how some of those things factor in. But typically, if they're separated, if they are separated because of them alone and et cetera, and they have separated and live in separate homes and are seeking that separation, typically it's going to be the one parent. But if you have questions about it, call us. And we'll go over the individual scenario. But this should kind of help walk you through that. Like I said, we come in different shapes and sizes, and there's a way to work your way through that. So thank you for asking that question. Okay. Estimating income. How many of you have taxes done for 2014? Oh, yay, you're the first one I've seen. You win. That's awesome. Well, I just got my W-2s last week, so I don't have mine done yet, I admit. But those are becoming 1098-T forms. How many of you are already looking for those? I understand they're supposed to be out maybe like next week or something. So that's you know what a 1098-T form is? That's the bursar's office makes that available, and it talks about what you're paying in tuition and things like that. So that gives you information, tax information about your college expenses and so forth. Good addition for that. Okay. So estimating income. You don't have to have your taxes done until after FAFSA. And when you're talking about getting things done as soon as you can so you can get the best benefit, be the early bird. And especially, there are some folks, I don't know, we usually wait till April 15 because we don't want the government to get our little whatever, and we just assume pay taxes April 15th as opposed to January 31st, and we'll earn the interest on what we don't give them, we'll earn that little bit of extra. So a lot of parents are in that scenario. They don't want to do their taxes till April 15. So that's why it would be after the March 1st deadline, wouldn't it, if they wait, or you wait. And then that would be too late for OTAG. So that's why you want to go out and estimate, use estimate. Some folks will use last year's tax information because it's about the same maybe. So that's an option. Or you can use this estimator that's on the FAFSA. It will help you to estimate, or your parents to estimate their income. And then you can just move on. But the key is you got to go back and correct it later. And make sure that it's accurate. And sometimes then the school, when we get your information that says, oh, they said they will file, they haven't filed yet, then we have to go back out and we ask you for more documents and say, and then we verify it and then we move on. So if we ask you for information, the key is to get it in the right way, as quick as you can. And as soon as you get taxes done, go out and make the corrections. And they can be done by logging back into the FAFSA, click log in and go in and make a correction, and you can do that. Now, how many of you have ever used the data retrieval tool on the FAFSA? Anybody familiar with that? We've got some that are. Good deal. That is an opportunity through the federal site that FAFSA, if you select that or are offered that opportunity and follow the procedures, it'll take you to the IRS website, and then the IRS information will populate. It will populate FAFSA with that tax information, yours, and then your parent can do it for theirs also. So that's kind of nice because then you're not guessing trying to look at lines on the tax return, which one goes where. It's a very helpful tool. It's accurate, and we take that as we don't have to get a document to verify it. That's verified information. So that makes the process a little easier. So tax returns, if you file electronically, about 3 weeks after you file for taxes electronically, you can log back into the FAFSA and potentially use that data retrieval in most cases. And what you would do is typically, because when you fill the FAFSA out, you're going to say, I will file, or your parents might say, will file. When you go in to do the correction, you'll change that answer to have filed now. And then it should pop up that opportunity. You might be able to use the data retrieval, and you'll go through a series of questions and steps, and it will take you through it that way. Now, there are a couple scenarios where you might not be able to use data retrieval, and that would be a situation where parents perhaps filed as married filing joint, but they're separated now, or they were separated at the time, you filled out the FAFSA, but they had to file joint return. And that would be a situation where you might not be able to do that. But if you have questions about that, it'll tell you. It asks a series of questions, and they'll say, oh, you probably aren't eligible to use it then if that's the scenario or something. Just follow the instructions and it will help you to do that. So data retrieval, or the other ways, you can just put the information in also if you need to. Oh, here's talking about the IRS data retrieval. But again, you can use it as initial application if it's all done, or if you wait that long, or you can use it about 3 weeks after you do that. Here is, on the other side of this sheet, is just some information about the data retrieval. Again, a little bit of a help to get you through that process. We get a lot of phone calls of people trying to figure out that data retrieval because it is handy. And this will give you a little flow chart, a little bit of the tools to help you complete that when you're ready to do that. Any questions about data retrieval, or when you can use it, or when you should use it, or filing your taxes? Any questions about that at this point? Well, if you have some later, you know where we are. You're more than
Oh, I know.
Yes.
I know that if you enter your information wrong, it like blocks you out. I think you have like 3 chances. How long do you have to wait so you can go back on there and transfer?
You know, I don't know the answer to that question. That's a fair question.
That happened to me last year.
It happened to you last year, and it was actually in the data. Where were you at in the?
Yeah, it was on there, like on the retrieval tool, and like you have to enter like exact information that was on your taxes, and you misspelled like my dad's last name on there, and I kept trying to put it in right, but I didn't know that it had to be exactly, so I had to like actually misspell it on purpose and pull it up. I didn't realize that until like the 5th try, and it like blocks you out after 3 times.
Did you go back in the later?
Yeah, I don't remember how long I waited though. That's why
I don't know if it's a 24-hour wait
Yeah.
or something like that. Maybe.
I don't know.
That's a fair question.
Personally, I think I had a student who misentered his social, and it was a 3 to 5 day, 72 hour, but.
On the data retrieval?
Oh, I don't know about that, but I'm talking about just the misinformation.
The FAFSA
Yes.
information from the beginning.
Right.
And that one, sometimes you almost have to redo the FAFSA.
Start all
Start
over.
from scratch. It's almost easier because it's quite a change. But that's a fair question. And good point to bring up how important accuracy is. And that's right, on the data retrieval tool. It wants it exactly as it is on that tax return. I absolutely no change in it. It's right. Because it's a computer, it's how it recognizes it. So, well, good point, thank you. Other thoughts? Experiences? Okay, and sometimes we get a lot, folks are a little bit leery about that tax information floating around out there. It's private, it's personal, et cetera, and it is, you're right. But you and your parents have control over whether you use that data retrieval or not, but it is secure. And we can't just hop out on the IRS website and pull your information down. We don't have access to do that. The government doesn't do that. You have to use this tool to allow that to happen, and so it is a secure thing. But I just want to make that point. That's something parents are often concerned about, and should be wary and very diligent about protecting their information. Absolutely, this is a really useful tool. It's safe and a good opportunity. Okay, sign and submit. This is where you come in with your PIN number and your parents' PIN number. Both of you have to sign it if you're an independent student and have to put parent information on. So this is where you'll have the opportunity to do that. Put in your information and click sign, and then it'll be there for you. And then you should be sure and click the button that submits it. Don't forget to do that. Confirmation page. This will give you your confirmation number. So if you were to call the feds back and say, hey, something's up, you could at least give them a confirmation number that shows that you've done that. Data release number. If you forget to put our school code on there, or any school code on there, it won't go anywhere, right? And so we might try to pull that information in or look it up, and it'll say DRN required. And that means that you didn't authorize us, you didn't put our school code on, so we couldn't pull it in. But you could give us this data release number and we can pull it in for you, or you could just go back and make a correction, put the school code on it. You can always go back and correct that, but you'll put it on first, that won't be an issue. And then you'll find that on this also, it will give you your estimated EFC. There's that acronym again, the expected family contribution. So right away you'll have an idea, am I eligible for Oklahoma tuition aid grant or not? Or kind of give an idea, and it will tell you, and that's the state one, because because that won't be listed on here. But the federal grant opportunity, it will say, oh, it looks like you may be eligible for a Pell Grant. For this current school year, if you had an EFC of 0, you got $5,730 of Pell Grant. That's a full Pell Grant. So, it would tell you that would be what it is. Or if you got a little higher, the Pell will be a little lower. But it will give you an idea of that and of what you may be eligible for in student loans. It just gives you a little preview of that information. And then, what happens next? The FAFSA folks, the federal processor, is going to notify you as soon as they process it. They're going to say, hey, you've got it. Usually it's just a couple of days. It's pretty fast. They'll send you an email letting you know that they have processed that. And that's your cue to log back on the FAFSA and review the student aid report, the information. That it's a summary of everything that you put on there. And there are comments. So let's say you filled it out, but you didn't have your parents put their PIN number in, and the parents didn't sign it, and their information's on it, required to be, but they didn't sign it. It will do what's going to reject it, and it'll. So in the comments, it'll say, "Oh, it looks like your parents needed to sign this, but they didn't." So that's where you can go back and make sure everything's in order. You have control over that. Information is power, so that'll help you so you can get that completed as quickly as you can. But you're going to have that all signed anyway the first time in.